Luke Parker, welcome to the Process Podcast, my friend. How you doing?
Ed, you are a legend. I'm honored to be on the podcast, man, and catch up with a dear friend.
Mate, maybe we should talk about that. How did we first meet? I'll tell you my story first. My story when I first
Okay.
met you was 2019. Ant had qualified to CrossFit Games. I had developed quite a close relationship with the guys at Training Think Tank. Obviously, Kyle was my coach for 7 years, and we decided to fly to the US early, do a training prep camp with the Training Think Tank crew who were also prepping for the games. So I think we spent about 2 weeks out there. Um, and I walked into the changing room on day one just to dump my bag and get changed. And you had sat in the changing room. And I think that was our very first, the first time we ever met. You kind of just introduced yourself.
Yeah.
We had a quick chat. I said, like, I was from Hong Kong. You were like, where the hell's that? And then we ended up spending basically the next 2 weeks together. You were a part of that camp. You were super early in your CrossFit days. I
Yes.
have a lot more thoughts to share on that. But what's your first memory of our meeting?
Yeah. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I'll dive into my Genesis story and talk about, my athletic background and how I got into CrossFit. But before we get into that and introducing myself, it was really neat meeting Ant, you, and you
Tammy.
said Kyle. Yeah, that's how you got connected.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tammy as well. My bad. Kyle Ruth, being your coach, was just kind of tucking me under his wing as well as Adam Rogers and obviously Max El Hodge, all the coaches there, right? And Travis Mayer. I was about 8, 9 months into CrossFit. Just left the local box. I was maybe 4 solid months in training think tank and getting after it, trying to be the best athlete I could and learn from everyone as best I could. And they mentioned that there was a games prep camp, and I was like, well, asking all the coaches, hey, can I be a part of this? Can I be a part of it? Like, I'll help with equipment. I'll stay out of the way. I just want to I want to get used to this kind of training because this is where I want to be. And thinking that you and your brother both look like you needed to be on the movie Aquaman, like you guys with your shredded 6 packs of abs and your fitness levels. I was like, man, these are some serious fit dudes, and your aesthetics were both super freaky. And you guys were just super friendly. I thought your English accents, knowing like your was it your mom or your dad that was English?
Dad.
Yeah, your dad that was English, and then your mom being with the China
Yeah.
uh background. Like the mixture of you guys was so unique and so awesome, and hearing like kind of like your upbringing and everything. But yeah, my memories of you guys was just broing out, eating all the carbs and getting after some serious training, getting ready for the games. And it was really neat to watch Ant get after it that year. But yeah, those
Yeah.
are
You
some
know
good
what?
times in old Alpharetta, Georgia.
You know what? I always think, like, having watched your journey since then, and for the listeners tuning in who maybe aren't so familiar with you, I mean, you finished fifth at the CrossFit Games last year with CrossFit in Mayhem Independence. You've been
Yep.
competing alongside Rich Froning for a long time. Obviously, you joined Mayhem at a time where I feel like Mayhem's social media and marketing presence were just like booming, and they were really starting to become,
Just starting to
yeah,
grow.
really
Yeah,
starting to
massive.
become a real business. And I guess the amount of exposure you started to get was kind of crazy. And you know what I find really crazy was that, and I'll be totally honest here, was when we were chatting at Training Think Tank. It's 2019, you just started CrossFit. There was a lot of skills that you were kind of still in that, like, those early days of just learning and acquiring. And you said to me one
Right.
day, I want to be at the CrossFit Games. And genuinely my thought was like, this guy is delusional. Like, he's late.
Yeah,
He's late to the game. You're a fully grown man. You're late to the game in a sport that's super competitive already. Like, it was kind of crazy that that whole weekend, other than heavy workouts, like, I was crushing you in workouts.
for sure.
Yeah, and like,
Everyone was crushing me.
yeah, and it was so cool that you were just like, just wanted to be there, wanted to absorb, wanted to speak to everyone, super friendly vibe. And then
Yeah.
just seeing, just even the next year, how rapidly you progressed. And then fast forward literally not even 3 years later, there you are, competing with Froning, one of the greatest CrossFitters of our time, if not the. at Wadapalooza.
The
And it's
the
just it's honestly it's insane. And now you're on a quest, pursuing the individual route, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. Just so much
right.
growth so quick, which I think is really, really rare for someone who got into the sport so late. Of course, you had athletic background. Of course, like you were probably predisposed to be great in the sport, but it's just more than ability. There's mindset, dedication,
Yeah.
commitment, which I think you showed at a really early stage. What are your thoughts when I say that? Like, what does that make you think about?
I mean, I agree. Something, and I don't want to come off like cocky or boastful, but something that I believe I've been blessed with is the mindset, right? Everyone who's listening to this podcast that does CrossFit or gets after it in fitness knows that you got to be a little crazy. I mean, even if you're doing CrossFit for fun and you're doing it to stay fit and get after it with your friends because the community, you got to be a little crazy. You got to have a little bit of edge to you that wants to stay fit and functionable to be the healthiest, fittest, best version of you that you can be for your life and for the people in your corner, your family, whether it's your wife, your husband, like your kids, whatever your situation is, to be the best you. And I think that's something that I've always had in me is kind of that fire to be the best me and to be a competitor. So when you say all that, I mean, I look back and I had no idea. I can't be like this cocky guy that's like, yeah, when I started CrossFit, I knew I was going to be this great athlete that was going to come up and actually be able to get to the top of the sport and breach, making it to the games. I had no idea, but I knew that I was going to go all into this thing and I knew I had potential because, like you said, I was a raw athlete, got into it late, was like 24 years old, um, ex college baseball player, played like high school football, loved to get after it in the weight room, did like bodybuilding and stuff. Um, I mean, as far as nutrition and knowledge of training, I was in a very learning stage, if you will. So I mean, let me dive into the intro, right? Because I feel like I haven't even introduced myself. So and then I'll try to be quick on the Genesis story, like kind of my athletic background, and then we'll dive right into your question because I feel like your question is about like, really obviously it's you're interviewing me, it's my story, and it's like talking about how unique it was of how I got to grow and progress in the sport. So for those of you listening, yeah, I'm Luke Parker, and I'm known in the CrossFit space originally for my reality TV background on The Bachelorette, ABC's Bachelorette season 15. Um, Now I'm starting to be known as an athlete, which is cool for me because that's what I want to be known as and known for the kind of man I am and as far as my character goes. But yeah, let's talk about my Genesis story. I grew up playing all sorts of sports, kind of like you and Ant, your brother. Kind of like what we've talked about before, playing as many ball, hand-eye coordination sports and things as possible. My dad was super into bodybuilding and loved training and working out. And a lot of my mindset comes from my mom as well. She's a hustler as far as work goes, and she's just a grinder and always loved to take care of her body. But my dad too is always just pretty hardcore when it came to if he was going to do something, he was going to go all in. So I feel like growing, that's kind of innately been in me, and I've learned and adapted just from being around my mom and dad through that. And then I played like moving up in my life. Let's talk like high school years. I committed to playing baseball as my primary sport, but I also played high school football. So I was exposed to a little bit of CrossFit and I didn't even know it. So I'm doing like hardcore deadlifts, like power clean workouts where we're like running sprints and having to do stuff with the barbell. We didn't snatch or anything, but we did like bench press and back squats and stuff like that. Pushing sleds and tackling each other, right? Football style training. And then played 4 years of college baseball after high school. Only baseball, was kind of in the like agilities and staying athletic as an outfielder and doing some like short, sprinty, explosive style workouts. Still worked on running and being an athlete. And then, yeah, I just remember being in like a position like most athletes that'll say, yeah, like I grew up watching YouTube videos of this Rich Froning guy and saw how he got the crowd going, and I saw that he had Galatians 6:14 on his side, which in a nutshell just means that he's giving glory to God and he's acknowledging that God is the giver of all his gifts and his opportunities, right? And boasting in that, not himself. And I was like, man, this dude works out for a living. He gets paid just to go savage mode and go as hard as he can in workouts, and he's making good money. And I was kind of blown away, but I still had the old school mindset of like bodybuilding. Like you can't squat multiple days in a row. It's just not possible. I was uneducated, right? You understand what I'm saying? Like thinking like the old bodybuilding mindset is I'm going to squat till I drop. I'm crawling out of the gym. You know what I mean? I'm throwing up in trash cans. I'm doing so many squats and leg press. I shouldn't be able to squat the next day rather than doing a healthy amount of volume. And whether it's air squats or whatever, I didn't realize in CrossFit you could squat every day and you're going to be fine. And it's actually practical and it's a healthy style of training, which we can get into that later anyway. But anyway, so I started friends telling me I should get into CrossFit, thinking, maybe I should try it. Still hadn't tried it yet. Hang up my cleats after college baseball. Don't play professionally. I was pursuing that. And then my brother and I actually found triathlons as a hobby because my brother was like, hey, my brother played a year of professional baseball and gotten married and had his first daughter. And he kind of like, he used to be super fit and jacked and strong. And he was kind of unmotivated to get in the weight room. And he was like, hey man, I've gained a little weight. Let's do something let's put something on the calendar to lose some weight. And this actually really helped me with CrossFit was we put a half Ironman on the calendar and we trained for about 6 to 8 months for a half Ironman. We did like Spartan races. We did a 100-mile bike race in the mountains that had like 15,000 feet of elevation gain. I learned a lot about periodization training and like progressions as far as endurance training goes, and did a lot of swimming. Never swam in my life, so that's why I'm a decent swimmer now in CrossFit, is training for that half Ironman. Biked multiple times a week, did a lot of running volume, and I got to actually in that 6 to 8 month period, without even knowing it, build an aerobic base and engine. And then about right at like maybe a month and a half before that, a half Ironman, I did my first CrossFit workout in North Georgia and got hooked to CrossFit in a local box. And that's kind of my genesis story. Sorry, that took a little bit longer than I thought it would.
Can I ask what hooked you to CrossFit when you first did your first workout?
I'll be honest. Starting CrossFit, I was like, hey, I want to see if I have what it takes to be a professional at this. And
before
my first real
even
work,
tried it? Is that what you were thinking?
Before I even tried it, which is kind of unique, right? Because most people try it because they want to try something new to stay fit. That wasn't my story. Like I wasn't going to be a professional baseball player, hung up my cleats, and I knew that wasn't where I felt like I was being called to in life. And I was looking to be a professional in something, and I figured triathlons wasn't for me. I was too big and jacked for that. And yeah, my first real workout was Murph, and I happened to take my dad's real like body armor. It ended up being like 30 pounds. I didn't know there was like an RX 20-pound thing. I had no idea what CrossFit was, didn't have grips. I ripped from my like knuckles up here to like my palms. I was bleeding so bad. It took me an hour to do Murph. I did it unpartitioned and it was hell. And I just remember thinking, if I continue to do this craziness, I think I could be really good at it. And it blew my mind that people got paid to do that. Because I thought it was awesome. I was like, I get it. Those people that make it to the thing that's on TV, which I didn't know was the games at the time, I was like, it's like a coliseum. If I was a fan, I'd love to go watch these people, just destroy their bodies and see what they're physically capable of doing. Like, I'd love to go watch that. And then I was thinking, I was like, man, I think I could be good at that. And then that was when I made up my mind. I'm going to train as hard as I can for the next few years and see if this is legitimately something I can do professionally. If not, I'll hang it up and do the next thing. And I know you have some questions, but as that progression happened, I learned that, man, I love this stuff. I love the community and I love the community aspect of it. Come as you are. I don't care your fitness level. I don't care your background. You're welcome here. and we have scaling options and stuff for you. That's what really drew me in as I started learning CrossFit, was the community. And I fell in love with it, and I wanted to do it for the rest of my life. As I learned about it and got educated on it, regardless of competing. So I don't
Mm.
want to just act like I'm just this dude that was like only compete, compete, compete. So I fell in love with the sport and the community, and then started learning, wow, I'm actually improving kind of fast.
So it's like the initial driver was this idea of becoming a professional athlete in the sport, but actually you kind of fell in love with the process of the training and the grind and the community and the gyms and the learning. That almost becoming a
yes,
professional athlete almost became the byproduct of enjoying that journey so much.
absolutely. And for me, it was feeling like I was at home. I mean, being a college athlete, that locker room uh, atmosphere felt like walking into a box. Everyone
Mm.
walks in, kind of like college baseball. Everyone walked in the locker room before a game or before practice. We're all chit chatting, just like you walk into whether it's a 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. class for CrossFit. They become your family. They're maybe people you just met for the first time, but after a few months, they're your friends. And after a few more months, they're family. And you guys know everything about each other. And the community, like I was saying, come as you are, you're accepted. Like, let's just grind and get better. Like, if we're here, we're gonna all collectively work together to move here, no matter where you are, what that looks like. And to me, it was like being an athlete growing up, so it felt like home.
Yeah, I can resonate with that a lot. I think that's something that really attracted me to the sport, was that it was replacing. I played team sports my whole life, and it was like I was in a team sport environment all the time, even if it was technically an individual sport. But like, the shared camaraderie and the shared striving towards a similar goal, being surrounded by people all the time doing the same thing as you, was something that I loved about it. Can I ask you, Luke, what
Yeah.
what spurred the transition? And I think I kind of know now, having heard what you've shared so far. What spurred the transition to moving from that local box to training think tank?
Yeah. The coach, his name is Jesse Foster, such a stud. At the time, he'd been running that gym for 5 years now. I think it's about 8 or 9 years. I think eight, whatever, however many years. Stud dude, and he knew the community. He's a good athlete in that area and fit at that time, you know, going on tour for the local competitions and kind of seeing who's fit around there and being there for a while. He knew Travis Mayer and he knew Training Think Tank, and he knew if there's anyone in this area that actually wants to do this professionally in that area, the only place to go is Training Think Tank, and to go jump on board with Travis Mayer. And he told me that. And I told him I'd do it. So I tried it out.
But that's
And
cool
that
that
was a fun. Go ahead.
it's cool. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's cool that a gym
Yeah,
owner
you're good.
and that you're a member of his gym has actually said to you, listen, like, your goals are to pursue this. I'd recommend going here and working with these guys. I think that takes a very humble human being.
Yeah, he was very humble because he knew he was a great athlete and he could go pursue it himself, but he had different goals with his wife and the business and running the gym. And he loved it. And I mean, I'm biased, but he's one of the best, if not the best coach in that area as far as running a local box.
That's awesome. What was it like stepping into
Yeah.
training think tank and becoming a part of that community? Because I think, sorry for listeners who don't know, training think tank, especially at this point in time, was transitioning into being like the home of very high level athletes, bringing a lot of people moving on site. Obviously, it's Travis's gym, and Travis at this point is a multiple CrossFit Games competitor. They've always got big dogs, boys and girls coming into town to train. What was that transition like?
Yeah. I mean, I think you made that sound perfect for the listeners. Like you said at the time, all the big heavy hitters are there in the area, like Travis Mayer's friends, like Ant, your brother, coming to visit for the games prep camp. Friends are visiting all the time, like Noah Olson, Chandler Smith, Lucas Parker at the time with the big red beard from Canada at the time. Like, he's dropping in all the time. Um, I didn't know any of these athletes. I was very uneducated in the sport. I hate to say it like this, but really the only person I knew was Rich Froning. And I walked in down the hall in training think tank with my brother. And I remember trying to find someone to talk to, like Travis, because I knew about Travis from my local box coach telling me about him. However many times he had made it to the games at that point. I think he was like a 6-time games athlete. I don't remember the numbers, but I remember walking down and seeing like Granite Games, like gold medals, like all these medals and games jerseys, and I remember being like, "Whoa, this looks like Rich Froning's lair. Like this Travis guy must be a stud." And then I walk in, and Travis is the only one working behind the desk at the time, and he's like, "Hey man, what can I do for you?" And I'm like, "Hey, I want to be like you. What do I do?"
That's
I'm
awesome.
like, I'm 24, you're 28. I want to be like you when I'm 28. Where do I go? He goes, just like you were saying when you met me, same reaction. He's like, here we go. Here's another one of these guys that thinks he's going to the games. But he didn't, he was really cool. He was like, bro, I love that. He goes, but I'm not the guy to talk to. Right around the corner is Training Think Tank, and you need to talk to Max Elhaj. And he handled it so cool. Travis was awesome. And my first experience of Think Tank was actually crazy. I'll never forget this. I would turn around the corner. This is back when Max Elhaj really took training seriously. He's hitting like a 290 snatch, like sharing a barbell with Mike McGoldrick, who's one of the coaches. For listeners that don't know, jacked, absolute ape
Silly
gorilla
strong.
of a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, on a barbell. And I look and see like Colson and Calorina, and there are these two women athletes at the time who were like fringe individual games athletes, but they were extremely strong, extremely fit, extremely aesthetically jacked, like almost to the point where you're like, holy moly, what do these people do? They look like superheroes. So I walk around the corner and I see them, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm in the right place if I want to do this sport. So I thought it was crazy. And yeah, it was a tough transition, honestly. It was a lot of humble pie to answer your question. I got my butt kicked in workouts for like literally a year and a half straight by everyone.
But I feel like you just had the right mindset to be getting your ass kicked. You know, you were kind of welcoming it. When I met you, it was like you were looking to get your ass kicked. You were looking to get beaten. Like you didn't want to be the fittest person there. It was like you just wanted to learn from everyone. I thought that was a very great trait and a great value of yours that I certainly picked up when I first met you. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that comment or compliment, excuse me. But yeah, it was hard not like it was easy almost for me in that environment to not have an ego and
Hmm.
to kind of be more humble because I had no choice to receive humble pie. When for listeners that don't understand like that phrase, when I say humble pie, I mean like being humbled to the point like I know everyone in this room is better than me. They're fitter than me. Their skills at the sport is better than me. Their experience is better than me. So I can't have an ego. I can only be like a sponge and just try and take it all in and learn from these people. So it was kind of easy for me to do that. And like you said, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to see how much can I learn and take from these people. So, and it was a lot. I got to learn a lot from even you and your brother in that few months when I got to train with you guys.
So awesome. Tell me about this transition away from Train Think Tank to Mayhem. Now, can I try and guess why you part of the move? I mean, number one, you've referenced Rich Froning a lot so far. And obviously, I'm thinking about young Luke
Yeah,
Parker coming into sport. He was kind of like your idol and hero already. And he was like the only, like you said,
for
it's
sure.
kind of funny hearing that you walked into Travis's gym and the only person you knew was Froning. And then seeing Travis's medals being like,
Yeah.
wow, this is what Rich Froning's home must look like. Was that part of the
Yeah.
reason you decided? Was that part of the reason you decided to make the move to Mayhem?
I'll say this. I did leave this out,
Hmm.
but my brother and I talked when we were doing triathlons, and I was just talking about starting CrossFit for the first time. And we both talked to each other about how, hey, eventually, and my brother was egging me on to do it fast. And I was kind of like, I don't want to do that until I feel like I'm ready, which when are you ever ready, really? And that was to make a trip to Cookville and to go try meet Rich. Because at the time, like, I don't think I would have ever made it or survived because I trained my tail off really hard for a couple of years at Training Think Tank. and learn from everyone, Travis, you, everyone that I could, all my coaches, Adam, Max, and it was the perfect step for me to go dive into like extreme games training every day. It'd almost be like me because they gave me the perfect amount I was ready for at Think Tank, Adam, my coach. And it'd be like me jumping in with like Noah Olson or Travis Mayer on every day their programming, which obviously when I started, I couldn't do that. You know what I mean? I'd get rhabdo. Like my body would reject that. You know what I mean? They'd have to take me to the hospital because that volume, I mean, listeners that have experienced what I'm talking about, they know. Like you're sore for a week if you do the volume some of these games athletes do for just a couple days if you're not used to it. Like it could like seriously hurt you. And yeah, I think as far as making the transition though, I'll just dive into the story real quick because I know you're going to ask me. So when I was at that games with you in 2019, for listeners to kind of understand context here, I literally just get off reality TV. So at the time, you have millions and millions, like dozens of millions of viewers on this ABC reality TV show about finding love. And I get off the show, and that was almost like a week before you guys moved there for games prep camp when I got off the show. So I'm fresh. I'm going out in public. People are recognizing me. I had a lot of eyes on me, a lot of people on like social media talking about the show, like super fans of the show. And I'm this rookie CrossFitter who's trying to get good at CrossFit. And I go to the games to spectate. Well, it's speed up when Ant competed in 2019. I got to meet Rich because I got some comment. Someone like tagged Hillary Froning, Rich's wife, saying, "Hey, oh my gosh, Luke P is going to be at the games spectating." And I DM'd her when I was there with my brother. I was like, dude, how did she get tagged on my picture of me saying I'm going to Madison? So I was like, I'll reach out when I was in Madison. And she DM'd me back saying, I'm a fan of The Bachelor franchise. I have like a Monday night watch party every Monday with my girlfriends. And like, I'd love to meet you. I'm a fan of you and your story. And like, I'd love to meet you. And I'm like freaking out, of course. So I think this is a funny story, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible for the sake of the podcast. But this is funny. I mean, like I'm there in the in Madison meeting Rich Froning, and I'm not really fangirling him, but I'm freaking out. I'm like, obviously anyone who's like wanting to meet someone, I'm like, this is such a cool opportunity. So I'm kind of like fangirling him. His wife's fangirling me because of The Bachelorette, which is just funny now looking back at it. And I had no idea what was going on. And it was really neat. Speed up the story. I'm on the way home back to Atlanta after the games, and I'm sitting next to the CFO of Mayhem. I didn't know it at the time. Who's like, at the time, Rich is like right hand man when it came to finances and all things, taking care of the business of Mayhem and decisions for the company. And I don't remember how it all came about, but we ended up talking all things faith, family, fitness, which are the core values of Mayhem. And connecting all these things. And he's like, yeah, I know Rich Froning. And I told him the story I told you. And I'm looking at him like, this is just some guy that thinks he knows Rich. I didn't know he was like his right hand man at the time. Well, anyway, they were just starting to create the Mayhem Mission nonprofit. And like I told you, like as far as core values in my life and things that like are my foundation and that I like the hill that I'll die on is my faith. And I'm telling him like, look, I'm at Training Think Tank. Like I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, and like I'd love to just help with some of this nonprofit stuff of giving back and serving the community and these things you guys are doing globally overseas. Like I'm really into that and I want to help you guys. And you know, I'm trying to become a professional CrossFitter and I'd love to like visit sometime. So Brian Nelson, the CFO of Mayhem, was like, hey man, I'll talk to Rich. If you met him, like, yeah, we'll let you come visit and you can help out with some of these nonprofit events. So I went and helped with some of the nonprofit events, got to talk to Rich and Hillary behind the scenes. And Rich was super cool, like super just conservative, just like country boy who's like super down to earth and he didn't care. He's just super fit, and like he just works out a lot. Country boy, that's a good dude. You know what I mean? And he invited me to come to the barn, and it took a long time before that actually happened because there was a lot going on with both our schedules, and then COVID happened. So it actually didn't happen till after. And at the time, it was interesting. I was on a team with Training Think Tank at Wadapalooza competing against Rich. And that's interesting because Kyle Ruth, your coach, was on that team.
Yep.
And I remember like starting competing with Mia and being like almost when I started on that team, like I didn't belong on that team. I wasn't skilled enough and I wasn't fit enough. And then by a year of training with them or however long it was, I remember thinking, man, developing with them and training hard with them, being like, man, like I feel like now I can grab a hold of this team and I can lead this team and be the guy that to go lead that team at Think Tank to the games. And that's what I told my fellow athletes and Mia and all of them. I was like, hey, look, like that's my goal. I'm taking this team to the games. I want to be an individual in the future, but first I want to go on a team. And then I'm trying to think of years. It's kind of all blurred to me, but COVID hit. That's right. So Wadapalooza, COVID hit right after Wadapalooza because I remember I was at the Atlas Games with me and my team, training think tank team, and they canceled the event like the first day of the event.
That's
and
right.
then everyone had to fly home, and then everyone's on quarantine in America, and then that lasts for a solid year, as far as all that goes. And then in that process, in that time, as things started becoming more normal, I went and visited Mayhem, got to train with Rich that next fall, and kind of get to know everyone behind the scenes. And he extended an invite, and I said, hey, look, you can't do that to me. Like, don't leave me on because you guys are my kind of people, and I'd love to live here and move here and train here. And he was like, yeah, come on. So I literally packed all my crap in a U-Haul and drove to Cookeville, Tennessee. And that was my transition. And for me, it was more like, because I had a family at training Think Tank and I loved all those people there. But as far as like sharing the same values and what is matters to me and what's important to me and how they handle things in Cookeville, and obviously like Rich just so happened to be like the Michael Jordan of CrossFit, right? Everyone calls him the GOAT. We know he has all the experience. He has, more gold medals than I have years of in the sport. And it's like, to me, it wasn't even about that. It was because of his faith and how he handled his life and how mature he'd become over the years. And when I was hanging out with him and broing out with him, it was just like things clicked. And I felt like God was leading me there. So that's why I made the decision so quickly. And that's why it was easy for me to make the move.
Again, it's like almost full circle with you and CrossFit. It was like Rich Froning could be this mentor to help me achieve my goals, but actually, I'm actually going to stay here for other reasons outside of just becoming a professional CrossFitter. Almost going back to that process again,
Right.
connecting on values, being surrounded by like-minded people, loving the day to day, and then again, like the long-term impact of that is that you achieve amazing performance and you're able to actually achieve your dream of going to the games.
Absolutely. Which
And
has been, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but what was that transition like? You move to Mayhem, you're meeting Rich, you're meeting your hero, and then suddenly, because this is now, it's like it was very. I feel like when you transitioned over, the whole world was seeing your transition because the content that Mayhem were creating almost every day with the vlog and on YouTube and on social media was like you could see. And obviously, I'd seen you at Training Think Tank and what your life was looking like there. And then I'm seeing your life now at Mayhem, and it's like it's another level in many regards.
For sure.
So what was that
For sure.
transition like?
I'm laughing right now because I don't even know where to begin. Like, as far as the transition, okay, so let me give you my mindset real quick because I think this is important. I knew I was going to Cookeville, but I knew it was something, the real reason I was moving was something bigger than CrossFit, right? I wanted to help be an asset with all the things they were doing with their business and with their nonprofit Mayhem mission. But I also knew I was on a mission to see if I had what it took to be a professional CrossFitter. And I mentally I didn't really tell anyone this. I might have told Brian, my roommate at the time, the CFO that I got connected with on the flight, who ended up being my roommate when I moved to Cookville, which is a whole nother story in itself. But I gave myself about a 4-month window in my mind of, okay, if I don't think I have what it takes to survive and make it here and thrive here, then I'm going to hang up my nano, so to speak, right? I'm going to just hang up CrossFit and quit doing it and focus on things that I can, whether it's coaching or whatever, and do something else besides competing as an athlete. But I wanted to be a part of what they were doing. And man, getting my butt kicked at Think Tank when I first got there, as far as humble pie, like I talked about, it was that all over again on a whole nother level. I got really fit, I felt like, and pretty dang strong when I left Think Tank and was on the team and everything. But like when I thought I was fit, I realized I was not that fit. When I thought I was strong, I realized I'm not that strong. And I can go down the list, but like, dude, I almost wanted to quit every single day, but I had to keep reminding myself why I was doing it. And I had to keep reminding myself of those days in training Think Tank when I kept getting my butt kicked, the games prep camps, and how much better I got after I actually recovered and survived the weekend of rest after getting my butt kicked all week. And it was just rough for me, man. Like I really thought I wasn't going to make it almost every day. Like learning to even train through like sorenesses and what felt like small injuries, but they weren't. It was just my body beat up and just fighting through it. And like to give you an example, like I was just in shock, my body, because, and I'm not hating on training Think Tank or my coaches there, but like the most handstand walking I've ever done, to give you a like visual example of numbers, like the most handstand walking I've done in my life at training Think Tank in one workout was about 300 feet. And to me at the time, handstand walking was kind of a weakness, and that was a lot of volume for me. That was like a crazy amount of volume for me. And like my first workout ever at Mayhem that had handstand walking, it had 1,000 feet of handstand walking, and it had 50, every 50 feet of that 1,000 feet of handstand walking had 2 obstacles you had to go over. And at the time, I'd been over the obstacle like a couple times in my life. So it was like what I was used to. And then what I was thrown into was like, it was insane the amount of volume for me. And that's what helped me adapt was I was scratching and clawing, fighting for my life for about 4 to 6 months before I actually felt like I could take a little step back and be like, okay, I'm like starting to adapt to this and I'm starting to be able to handle this. But as soon as I was able to handle it a little bit, I was just like, felt like I was drowning again. And the truth is, I was overtraining for where I was,
Mm.
but I was just refusing to quit. And my body had to adapt or I was going to just break. And I just kept adapting. And then it was kind of wild. I treated it like I qualified for the games because when I moved there, honestly, I wanted to be on a team and I thought that was my chance. Like, think about this, Ed. This is actually funny. I actually legitimately thought I had a chance to be on Rich's team because COVID happens that year. I call it the COVID games, right? They
Yeah.
saved CrossFit. Castro talked about going to the ranch. They only take 5 men, 5 women, and they don't have teenage adaptive division or teams for the games. So all those people don't compete, including Rich and Mayhem Freedom. So I'm thinking, man, so then they they stop super teams. They go back to affiliate cup. So if you're at Mayhem or whatever your affiliate gym is, you can use those people at your gym to be on your team. Hold on. I'm gonna plug in my computer while I'm talking. So I'm thinking, man, China Cho and Scott Panchik, who I competed against at Wadapalooza with Kyle Ruth, I'm like, they're not moving to Cookville, so who's he going to use? There's no dudes here. I'm the only one. Dre Strom at the time, who won the games with him previously, was like over CrossFit and had life stuff he was doing and helping work for Mayhem with like apparel and stuff. So I was thinking, man, it's my shot. And I'm looking to go team. And I'm like, man, I think Rich is going to pick me up. I was so naive. He was not going to pick me up. Although I did get a lot better in that year. And I might have been able to handle it, but there's still, I wasn't ready. And he ended up picking his cousin, and his cousin got Andrea and Taylor, and his cousin Chase Hill was super fit at the time, and they ended up going win the games. So I had to go individual. So when I qualified for the MAC, which by the way, they took 120 in America to go to semifinals in 2021, and I was like literally 119 out of 120 on the leaderboard of making it. So I made it by the skin of my teeth. And I hate saying this because I feel like I'm hating on Training Think Tank, because I'm not. They were giving me the volume that I should have, as an athlete at the time, it would have been appropriate, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have even come top 500 in the open or quarterfinals if I was at Think Tank. And to make top 118 or 119 or wherever it was, and to go to my first semifinal and get that experience at the MAC, Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge, was amazing. But to speed up the story, the point of me bringing all that up was I was fit for compared to my overall lifetime fitness, but I was still feeling like I'm drowning in volume. And then I was like, screw it. I'm going to train with them for the games, prep camp stuff. Like just train with them day in, day out. It was like every day, every week was a games prep camp, a think tank type style training every day until August. And I treated it like I qualified and trained with them every day. I tried to help them. I tried to stay out of the way when I could. They'd finish workouts. I'd do the same workout after them, or I'd do it with them, and I'd pair with certain people. And it helped me get really resilient, because it was like the first 4 months when I moved there, that same 4 month window just happened again.
Yeah.
Of just humble pie and dying and dying and dying. And then I decided to go team that next year, honestly, because Rich told me to, because I felt like I was going to be ready to go individual. But the truth was I had a few holes and my fitness wasn't there yet. And Angelo DeChico finally said, yeah, I'll go team with you. And it was amazing because Angelo, I don't know how much you know about him, but he's been with Rich and knows so much and been in the sport for such a long time, even at a young age, even with a couple of teenage gold medals. And I like to call it the Rich Froning brain cell that he has, because he's got extreme floor awareness and his experience is like off the charts compared to any athlete I've seen besides Rich. And like got to learn a lot from him and go team with him. Like you said, we came fifth at the games this past year on Mayhem Independence. Incredible experience. And like, I feel like I've been talking a lot. I want to hear you feedback where you want to steer this boat with this conversation. But man, as far as team goes, like, dude, I had so much fun. Like being a team sports guy, the team is the way to go. It is so much more fun than individual. And fight, you know how it is, fighting and digging deep in workouts and being on the floor with people in your corner up to your left and your right is just, there's nothing, it's just different. There's nothing like it. It's special.
Yeah, I mean, listening to all of that, it's like, you know, the volume piece and adapting, that is like forever what athletes and coaches are trying to find the sweet spot on, right? It's like at the end of the day, the athlete who can handle more and recover from it and ultimately adapt from it is the athlete that's going to win in the long term, right? Because their rate of adaptation and how much they're adapting to is faster than the athlete does less. And, you know, there is also that decision that you need to make as an athlete, as a coach, which is, all right, when is enough enough? You know, when the athlete is getting so close to breaking, sometimes if you just keep on pushing it a little bit more, the athlete can adapt and excel and grow and thrive. But then sometimes, obviously, you push that a little bit more and the athlete breaks and they stop CrossFit forever.
Gets injured.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes
rotator cuff.
Sometimes you have to go beyond that point and you have to break to then learn where your threshold is, and then know in the future that you got to stay below it, or got to flirt with that line a little bit closer. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, it takes a very unique individual, I think, to make it to the top of any sport, especially CrossFit, which is a very painful sport that requires a lot of volume and a lot of intensity and a lot of contractions. But you look at any top level athlete, they have something genetically unique combined with, you know, unbelievable mindset and the will to work and the will to suffer and all of that. It's, you know, you need the full package, especially where the sport's going now. So it's cool hearing your story and knowing that you were aware that like you could be overdoing this and you could be breaking, but I'm just going to try and see if I can continue. And it paid off favorably for you. With that said, I think in context is important here, because I'd like to know what else were you doing outside of the training and the recovering? You know, were you working? Did you have a job? What did your day look like? were you able to financially support yourself without something else? What was happening in the
Yeah,
background?
that's a great question. So when I was at Training Think Tank, I had that Unbroken Fitness business. It was my online
Yep.
business. I I had it for about a year and just got it going to the point where I could actually sustain a pretty decent income. And before that, when I was doing like triathlons and I was just starting CrossFit, I was working for my brother. I was pressure washing for him, which I don't even know how I survived all that. I was literally doing like CrossFit box class in the afternoon when I'm also like waking up at 5 a.m. or excuse me, before that in the pool swimming at 5 a.m. for like triathlon training and literally 9 to 5, like just running hoses around yards and cleaning, whether it was apartment complexes or hotels, like commercial grade pressure washing equipment, just grinding all day. And that was rough. But yeah, like then I had that Unbroken Fitness online business at Think Tank. And then when I moved to Mayhem, I sold that. I wasn't making a crazy amount of money, but I was making enough money, like you said, to sustain expenses as an athlete, food, rent, all the things, right? And I signed a non-compete when I moved to Mayhem, and the everyday athlete programming that I was programming, I started helping Mayhem with their stuff, kind of similar to what I was doing on my own, and made some money there. And then just so happened at that time, I was just because it was interesting. Like as an athlete, I was a no one, right? People knew me from TV, but also the Instagram followers I got from TV, technically there's people that are making six figures with sponsors with my following that I had that aren't even athletes. They're just influencers that went on some TV show and did all this stuff. And I didn't have an agent. I was learning a lot, but then I started getting some sponsors on top of trying to help Mayhem with some things. So I had a little bit of revenue there as far as a revenue stream, enough to get by as an athlete. And then after that first year, like my sponsors and money making through that as far as revenue started really spiking. And then like spiked a lot last year, even from where it was again, coming fifth at the games on a team. And it's been going really well as that goes. I'm not like, oh my gosh, crushing it, but I have something unique. I came from reality TV and I have a following and I've branded myself really how all games athletes want to have and want to be, right? They want to have 100,000 followers or more, a million. Obviously, everyone wants to have as many as possible to influence people and to impact people, but also to be able to use it for to have an income through social media and be able to do what they do as a sport. So I've been able to do that. I haven't had a job, which has been I have so much respect for like moms, dads, and guys that have full-time jobs that do this sport because it's so demanding. Like you said, there's so much training that goes into it, so many hours and intensity and emotion that goes into it. So it's a lot. And I really respect the people that can juggle that. For me in my life and where I'm at as an athlete, I feel like, yeah, I'm working on other things. I'm working on like potentially starting a business right now. I just got off a phone before the Zoom about like starting my own business on the side and trying to see like where other revenue streams are. I'm working on things like that, but right now it's just sponsors and full-time athlete.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, for listeners to understand is that, if you want to go all in with the athlete to be the best athlete you can be, like ultimately anything that
What
you're
it takes.
not contributing to you being a better athlete is essentially taking away from your ability to be the best athlete you can, I think. And it's not even just luck.
True.
I think looking back on your time on television and then using that and being grateful for that, to the opportunity that then created for you to then be an athlete, is pretty amazing, because then it allowed you to just go all in with it. I mean, look, it's funny. So I looked at your worldwide rankings just to remind myself just how good you got in the 3 years you've done CrossFit. So in 2019, which is when I met you, Luke Parker finished 133rd and 74, 133,074 in the world. The next year,
wait. Can I cut you off real quick
did you
because
not finish a workout or something?
That might have been pretty accurate, but it might not have been that bad because in 2019, which was my first open,
Yeah.
I did 19.1, 2, and 3, but there was still 19.4 and 5 I didn't get to do because I had to fly to LA to go film for reality TV.
Okay, we're just gonna pretend you didn't say that because it makes the story more dramatic when it
All
sounds
right, all right.
133,000 in the world. All I remember was that you
Uh,
were on my. I don't know if you know, Luke, but I have tagged you on this on Instagram quite a few times. But every year I make a custom leaderboard. It's called Nemesis
yes,
with all the
yes,
people that I've done CrossFit with around the world, like all my friends that I would not even say I'm similar level. Sometimes people way better than me. Sometimes you got to have people in your
yeah,
leaderboard that are way worse than you, so you don't finish last. But you were on my leaderboard that year, and I remember beating you and obviously giving you some shit on social media. And then
yes.
you were on my leaderboard the next year, and you completely destroyed me. And that was just so you know, that's the last year you've ever made it on my custom leaderboard. You're too good for my leaderboard now. Anyhow, you went from 133,000 to 1,428th in the world to 363rd in the world over 3 years, which I think for most people looking is pretty insane. So I think, just painting the
Yeah,
picture of the adaptation and the volume and how that was actually paying off in terms of your worldwide rankings was pretty nuts. I kind of have a good idea now of, like, one of my questions is going to be why transition to individual now, which is the route that you're currently on. But I think listening to your story, it makes sense. You understood that ultimately you wanted to be an individual competitor, but team was a great route to get there, to give you the experience, to learn, to fill in holes in your game, to give you the time. And I think now you probably feel ready, more ready than ever. Like you said, you're never ready, never fully ready, but probably more ready than ever to be an individual. Is that how you feel?
absolutely. Definitely the fittest and strongest I've ever been in my life right now. So yeah, as to answer your question, I definitely feel like I'm ready now. For sure, I'd like to be fitter, right? That's the competitor in me. I want to be as fit as possible. I don't want anyone to be fitter than me on the floor, which, I'm getting there. But this is the first year where I'm like, I believe I'm ready because I remember telling myself, why would I continue to compete as an individual knowing that if I happen to qualify, that when I get to the games, I'm just going to get my butt kicked because I don't really belong there. I barely qualified. That's why I wanted to go team, and because of being a team sport guy, and I think it's more fun and all of the things that go into that. But like as far as adapting and developing as an athlete, like I'd want to do well and exceed or succeed and do well as a team athlete, and then when I'm ready to make the transition and ready to make some noise, so to speak, go do that as an individual. But like you said, I mean, like the sport's been on an extreme level, just like it's getting more competitive, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
And it's awesome to see, right? Because as a fan, you want to see a good matchup. It's like a soccer or football game, right? Like you want to see a close game. You want to see the best athletes out there, and that's what we're starting to see here in the sport. And it's really cool to see, and it's tough because you're like you said, to be the best now, you got to put in the time and the sacrifice, and you can't have any holes. You can't be bad at anything. You got to be good at everything. So
Yeah, I want to switch gears here, Luke. I want to talk about your
yeah,
time on The Bachelorette. So, again, I'm reliving the stories of when I first met you. Was that
yeah,
when I first met you, um, and I'd hung out with Travis before being a training think tank. Travis said, "Oh, we have the guy who's just this dude was literally just on The Bachelorette." I'd already met you, had no idea. I already had a decent conversation with you. That wasn't even brought up. And then Travis comes up to me and says, "Oh, you know that guy, Luke, he was on The Bachelorette." And to be honest, I didn't even really know what The Bachelorette was. It's not something that's big in Hong Kong at all. So then
yeah.
it hadn't even really, I think it just aired, they just aired the first episode or something like that. Like it was just becoming a thing. Um, and so I kind of went home that night. Myself and Ant were like, okay, what is this? What is The Bachelorette? like what's this, like everyone's making a big deal out of Luke and saying like he's done this crazy show and he's like a massive, he's going to be a huge star. So we kind of started watching some YouTube clips of you, and obviously like you were a star, like everyone knew who you were, like there was so many videos on YouTube talking about you. But the general, and I ended up watching a few episodes and I thought it was super entertaining. Like I the one I obviously watched the most was the one where you guys played rugby. And it was
Yes.
like the two teams against each other. Cause you know, that's me and Ant's sport. And I loved how they dressed you up in like colonial old school rugby attire. And to be fair,
Old school rugby.
you were the only guy on the field who actually knew how to tackle. So now hearing about your American football background, I was like, okay, that makes sense. But you did smoke someone. I do remember that. You put a good hit on one guy. But I thought that was hilarious. But also, you were kind of painted as the villain of that season. Like I would say that a lot of the reports about who Luke Parker was were like not largely positive. And for me, the guy that I'd met in the gym who was nothing but positive and a super nice guy, I couldn't really make the connection. I was like, that's strange that's what's come out of this. And I'd also like to say something at the start of this episode you said was you'd come into CrossFit as someone who had a reputation on reality television, and you were now trying to be an athlete. And so you're transitioning between, I guess, one personality or one Luke to another Luke. So tell me about your time on The Bachelorette. Like, what comes to your head when you think about those times?
So right off the bat, I just gotta say there is so much to unpack here as far as like what I learned and how I grew as a man. And that's what I'm gonna try to focus on here because technically I'm still under contract for the rest of my life and I can't really talk about things behind the scenes. Um, or like hate on the show in any way, which I'll just say this to keep things short as far as what I'm going to say about the show is, out of 20 years of the show, and this is not from my own mouth, this is from other people that have been on the show. This is from people even behind the scenes of the show, like people that work for the show, is they've told me that they believe in the existence of the show, that I've had the worst edit. But I'll say this, I can't say anything about the show.
Yep.
I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm a human and I made mistakes and I did things on the show that don't line up with what I believe in. Was I this crazy psycho villain? No, I wasn't, but I was the villain of the season, that's for sure. With how
Can I just jump in there real quick, Luke? Because I mean,
yeah,
at
yeah,
the
yeah.
end of the day, it is reality television, and like television is going to love drama, it's going to love conflict. Like what the world needs a villain, the world needs a superhero. And I think
For
most of the
sure.
world understand that, out of thousands and thousands of hours of footage, to translate that
Yeah.
into a 30-minute episode, like there's going to have to be some serious cutting and editing to make something
Yeah.
entertaining. So you don't have to
Well
say it,
said.
but
Thanks for
I'm just going to
thanks
say that.
thanks for backing me up there. Thanks for
No.
backing me up there.
Okay.
Hey,
So,
I'm not saying this. Hey,
yeah.
I'm not saying this, but what my family would say about reality TV is there's nothing real about reality TV. But that's not coming from me. That's coming from my family. Anyway, but I like I said, I learned a lot. I grew a lot as a man, and I grew a lot in my faith.
Mm,
So what you would see, like you said, there's all this hours and hours of filming, but there's only a little bit that airs because they can only air so much, right? And you wouldn't know this by watching my season, but when I went through my experiences and I got home and I got to reflect, I learned a lot about myself. And I don't have time to tell you everything I learned because I learned so much, but I want to tell you what I think is a few of the most powerful, maybe most impactful things I can share for the listeners. And one thing was I learned a lot about an insecurity of mine
mm,
that I didn't realize. At the time before going on TV, I would have told you if you asked me, do you have any insecurities? I would have been like, nah, I'm not insecure. I don't have any insecurities. I'm too good for that. And the reality of that is I did. And they were really deep. in my life and in my past, and I struggled with them and I didn't know how to cope with them. And one is I fell into a rut and a habit of being self-conscious. Some people would call that fear of man, being self-conscious, or another way to describe this thing that I'm talking about is really, quite frankly, just caring too much about what people think of me. Is this idea of whatever I do, I'm thinking too much about what other people are thinking, where it hinders me from actually living, like what I say, how I walk, how I talk, lining up with what I truly believe in. And like I said, you wouldn't notice that watching the season. But when I got home, I got to reflect and I got to learn a lot about that specific thing, because there was a few times where, things are going on behind the scenes and I'm put in certain situations and I'm like, looking back, I'm like, why did I just like bold-faced lie to that guy?
Mm.
And the truth was I was worrying too much about the people in the room and the 8 to 10 cameras on me. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Instead of just blocking out the noise and what came out of my mouth and what I say and what I do, my actions lining up with what I believe in. And there's so many different ways I could take this, as far as like how, well, okay, cool that you learned that, but like, what have you been doing to work on that? Or how has this helped you, kind of thing? And the biggest thing, like I told you, is I'm a faith guy. I realize that, you know, having any insecurity is, to me, is a lack of faith in my mind as a guy who is a Christian, because I have security in God, right? Like God tells me, and I won't get too deep into theological stuff, but as far as religion, right? But to me, it's not about religion, it's about relationship. And my relationship with God, and reading and studying my Bible, tells me, I'm made in God's likeness and God's image. And it's like I have security in him and who he is and who he says he is and his promises. And I won't get too deep into that. And to try and tie this into someone who doesn't even have faith is, well, if you have any insecurities, it really is, it's fear that's bothering you. And I had a mentor tell me this, and I thought it was really cool. He goes, "You know what fear is? It's false evidence appearing real."
Yep.
And I thought that was super powerful. I was like, man, well, explain that to me. And he was like, well, let me take a quick pivot here. So picture yourself on a rooftop, skyscraper. If you're on the beam and you look down, you might see that you could fall and die, but that's danger. That's the reality, is that's danger. Fear is fake, because you are fearing and worried about what could happen if you fall, right? That's just false evidence appearing real. The reality is that's dangerous. There is danger there, but that's not going to happen. And it's like the same psychological thing of false evidence appearing real. It was this fear of man, this fear thing that I struggle with, circling back around to the insecurity thing, right? Being self-conscious, worrying too much about what other people think of me. And it's all false evidence appearing real to me, like worrying what they might be thinking of me. But at the end of the day, like everyone around you understands, because they're a human themselves. They've been given the body they've been given, the color of skin they've been given, the upbringing and childhood they've been given, and they just want to see you be you. They don't want to see you try to be this thing to impress or be a certain way for other people. They want to see you live the way you are. Everyone on the planet wants to look at someone and watch them be who they are,
Yeah.
right? And it's this fear thing that was messing with me, as far as like the insecurity piece and worrying too much about what other people thought of me. But again, like being a faith guy, what really helped me get through it was thinking, hey, like I'm not here for everyone else to prove myself to everyone else. Like I'm here for an audience of one, and that's God, my maker and creator. And I'm going to live for an audience of one, knowing that everything that I do is for him. And not everyone else. And that helped me get through it. But also that piece of me explaining, and again, I'll try to keep it short here, but just knowing that everyone around you understands that you're a human and they just want to see you be you, you know, like they don't want to see you try to be someone you're not. And let me, I'm going to keep going here for a second. So what I think is so beautiful about that, and it's something that I struggle with, and I hope I can inspire some listeners here, is, hey, if you've been through something rough in your life, whether it's a financial struggle, you lose your job, I don't know what is it, lose a family member, whatever it is. It could be you're ranking the open. I don't care what it is. You plug in whatever struggle or obstacle you're going through in your life. You know what's so cool about those things in your life is no one else can go through them but you. You uniquely have your story. And that's a beautiful thing. Don't try and be someone else and live someone else's story, because there's power in your story and no one has your story but you. And bringing in my faith piece of that is like the creator of everything, God, like gave you everything you have for a specific reason and purpose. You're unique and there's beauty in that, because no one can have your story but you. And there's power in your story, and people are going to learn and be inspired from your story and learn from you. And you're going to change lives through your story. So whatever it is that you have, whether it's an insecurity you have, whether it's your hair color, your eye color, your fitness level, I don't care what it is. It's beautiful because it's what you got. Go make the most of it.
Yeah, I like that. And, I resonate a lot with that story. And I talk about my own insecurity story a lot, which essentially boils down to people pleasing, right? It's you trying to be loved by people because ultimately you fear that the person that you are authentically is not enough. And so we put on a facade and we put on masks to try and make people love us more. And that ends up that we end up abandoning ourselves, right? And we end up abandoning our true authentic selves. And I think, I would say that I was a people pleaser for sure, for much of my life. And it just got to a point where it was exhausting. It was exhausting waking up every day, deciding what mask I had to put on based on who I was speaking to and who I was surrounded by, and essentially acting my way through a day. And obviously that ends up causing a lot of hurt and grief to myself. And I didn't want to do that to myself anymore. And so that then led to my own quest of finding out, okay, well, if I keep on abandoning myself, if I want to be authentically me every day, I need to find out who authentic Ed actually is. And so that is what started my whole journey and figuring out who I am. Like, who am I? And that was a combination of unveiling, which was like, unveiling for me is the person that I always was deep down in my core. Even when I think back to childhood days of being at primary school and like before 10-year-old me, like I was always that person. But throughout teenage years, university, sport, business, the mirror got real foggy and I lost touch with that person. I kind of transformed into someone else that I wasn't happy with. So the unveiling is wiping away that fog from the mirror and being like, oh, you were always this person. But then there's also been a big part of me that's been transformed. There was many parts of me that I wasn't happy with. And I would look at myself and be like, I don't want that thing to be a part of me anymore. How do I go about moving and becoming something else? And that was sometimes through inspiration, through seeing other people, and being inspired by what other people were and me wanting for that to be a part of me, but also looking at parts of myself I just wasn't happy with and being like, how do I get rid of that? And so like drawing on those two things. And I think ultimately now I'm in a place where I love authentic me. And I've learned to embrace authentic me with all its pitfalls and things that the world may not see as great. Like, it is just me and there's nothing I can do about it. And so now people pleasing is no longer really a part of my life, because at the end of the day, I'm not here to please everyone. I can't please everyone. And so, all I can do every day is be me. And if people love that, then they're going to come along for the ride. And if they don't, well, then that's totally fine. That's totally fine. And that's nothing for me to try and change.
I love that. And I resonate with that so much, because that insecurity piece that I brought up and how I tried to use certain language to describe it, you just flipped it over and we looked at the other side of the coin. And for me, right, because I'm in the same boat there, that was the root of my issue, is people pleasing, which can also be my biggest strength, is something that I have innate in me is being a peacekeeper. I just always want to make sure everyone's taken care of.
Me too.
And if I do that too much, I can turn into a people pleaser. And then like all those insecurities can go in of like worrying too much about what other people think. And like you said, trying to put on a different mask or different hat of being around certain different people and not being just authentic me. And yeah, bro, you hit the nail on the head there. And I think that you said that beautifully. And I think it's just like you said, like learning how, well, one, accepting it, right? Like, this is me and I'm just going to be me because I know that's who I'm meant to be. And that's the bottom line. And that's what they need from me because people know, people are smart, even if they don't say it. Like, I'm sure you have a list, and whoever the listeners are have a list of some maybe people in their life that they know in their community circle, wherever they are, that, that person probably puts on a mask and puts on a front when they're around me and the way they talk to me. And it's inauthentic. You may not tell that person that, but you're aware. People are smart. They can know when someone's like being inauthentic,
Yeah.
And it's like I don't want anyone to live like that. You know what I mean? I've been there and it's terrible.
But I
It's
think
terrible. I don't want Yeah, go ahead.
I think authenticity is like a very attractive trait that human beings just see. You sometimes they can't even put it down to the word authenticity. But when I think back to my days as
Yeah.
someone who was very inauthentic, trying to people please and be liked by everyone, I would always gravitate and have, I don't know, some form of admiration and love for the people that would just own themselves. So, when I think about rugby culture, which is like very much a certain way, and we speak the same way. It could, when in the UK we call it lad culture. I would get pulled into that and feel like I had to be one of those people. But then there was always people in the rugby team that didn't conform to that lad culture. They would just be like, nah, I'm not about that. They're still great rugby players, still awesome people to have on the team. And there'd just be something about those
For sure.
people that weren't jumping on the bandwagon and were just being themselves. And I was like, I don't know what it is about you, but I really respect and I love that. And those would also be the people that have a lot of love in their lives. And then I think going back to being the peacemaker, which I definitely resonate with as well, not myself. That's also a hard one because part of being a peacemaker and trying to help people, I think, is again a balancing act of being there to listen and support, but then also knowing when there's nothing you can do sometimes, and all you can do is inspire. Which is, I can go out and just be my authentic self. Hopefully, one day that'll have an impact on them, and that'll make them want to do the same thing. And that can be through my actions, through things I say, through the things I do. And that's a slow burn because often we want to, I think as peacemakers, you want to see change fast in people because you don't want to see them suffering because you're like, I've been through the suffering. I don't want you to go through that anymore. I have some tools and experiences that can help you. But at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. And so learning to be patient and just inspire by being consistent myself is sometimes all you can do.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I feel like this is really cool because I know when we first met, when you and Ant and Tammy made your way to the US for the games in 2019, it's just really funny to me because I know you've adapted and you were a great coach then and a great man and a human being, but like I can tell you've matured so much. And I know you would say the same to me because I've obviously matured a lot. Felt like a young boy when I first met you at the time. But yeah, man, it's cool hearing you talk about your experiences and even like how you're approaching perspective on yourself and talking through me explaining my insecurities. But I would say like, man, I'm actually like kind of shocked that we're so alike. Not shocked, but it's cool to talk about. We're so similar. I feel like with our traits.
Yeah,
and man.
I think that's just the cool underlying, and I think that's why vulnerability, like being open and sharing this kind of stuff, is such a powerful tool for connecting people. Because we can connect over CrossFit and the superficial stuff like training and health and fitness and coaching and competing. But the things that create deep-rooted connection, I think, are the things that are a little bit deeper, run a little bit below the surface. And I think that's why I'm all for vulnerability and sharing and openness, because the connections that it's given me in my relationships in my life are so much deeper than they ever were when it was all just about the superficial, you know. And
That's good, bro. That's good,
yeah, cool.
bro.
Thanks for sharing, buddy.
This talk's got me fired up, man. I'm proud of you, bro. I know
Thanks,
you're a good
buddy.
dude. You're a good coach. But
And you
it's cool
too.
to see it coming through your podcast too.
You know what? Something else is I think that's also important to say, you know, for two people who have acknowledged that they have insecurities and have tried to do something about it. I don't know about you, but whilst I'm in a much, much better place and I feel like I understand my insecurities, and I've even gone to the point of trying to figure out where they all started, you know, like childhood traumas and things that happened as a kid. And I can understand now why I
For
felt,
sure.
why I acted that way. It doesn't mean that that's not a part of me anymore. You know, there are still so many times where I will go into a social situation and I can feel myself being pulled away from being my authentic
In
self,
that direction.
right? And you feel
Yeah.
yourself like wanting to revert back to the people pleaser, and then acknowledging in that
Mhm.
moment to be like, okay, Ed, like, what are you going to do about this now? Are you going to be the people
Yeah.
pleaser? Are you going to put on a mask and abandon yourself? Or are you going to stay true and authentic to yourself and just be? And I
Yes.
actually love that challenge. I love like getting to those situations now and being like, no, like I'm not going to abandon myself. I'm going to be Ed, and if people loved him, then that's all good. And if they don't, that's also all good. And then coming out of that situation being like, okay, I've leveled up today. You know, I was able to stay true to myself. I didn't get pulled into inauthentic Ed. And I think, you know, I'm moving forward in life. Do you ever get those moments?
All the time, bro. All the time. And it's, to me, you're explaining maturity and understanding, right? It's really knowledge. And it's like you for sure, like to answer your question, all the time I'm putting those moments where I can see myself wanting to revert back to really, like you said, not being authentic. Like what comes out of me, my actions, the words aren't me. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, I have to stop myself. I'm like, wait, I got to be Luke. I got to be real. And I can't let the thought of like that kind of false evidence being real, the fear of man, the fear of like what could they be thinking stuff, let it creep in. Like I just got to be me. I don't need to be a people pleaser. So yeah, to answer your question, all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's easier to overcome now, and I see it show up less now in my life than when I first started learning about these things and going through them. It seemed like they happened all the time. But it's cool now to like in those certain few moments for me understand, okay, well, I'm reverting back to not those old things, those old ways, and like knowing now having the tools to be able to like overcome them, to make a stand.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a quote I always think about. One quote I always think about, you know, when you talked about false evidence appearing real, which I love. I've been exposed to that before as well, is that we suffer so much more in imagination than we do in real life. Which is also really
Wow,
the same
that's so
concept.
good. That's so good.
And I
Yeah.
think, you know, then the next one is, you know, us being recovering people pleasers, I guess you could say, and still having the triggers, you know, still having the triggers every now and then that appear. And I love the concept of like trust the triggers to teach. So when you do have that trigger, that's something that like strikes a bit of resistance in you, or like suddenly like your blood pressure increases, your palms start sweating, you know, you're getting all those like those nervous feelings and anxieties, or the sympathetic system's getting ramped up in that moment. Like
Yeah.
lean into that. You might not be able to do it in the moment, but you know, when you step away and you got some quiet, be like, okay, what triggered that, and what does that represent,
Yeah.
and what am I going to do about it? I love the idea of trusting the triggers to teach.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's just like the whole like improvise thing, right? Like you gotta learn and adapt from it. Because if you don't take the time to reflect and learn from it, then how like that experience doesn't do anything for you, you know?
Yeah.
It's like anything, like it's like failing, right? I mean, we know we can obviously use that in fitness, but it's in anything in life, right? Like if you fail from it, okay, that can still be a great teacher for you. Like
Yeah.
you're saying, use your trigger as your teacher. It's really like failing, right? When
Yeah.
something creeps in, whether it's an obstacle and how I handled it, like what can I take from that and like what can I learn from that? I love that perspective. It's just I think it's a hunger and a desire to learn and grow, right? I think that's the root of what we're talking about is make sure you still have a hunger and desire to grow to be better.
Yeah, I totally
Because then
agree.
you're going to be aware of those things, you know? So
It's adopting that growth mindset to always know that you can improve and be better. And I think I always think about it as life being like a curriculum. And you know, it's going to throw tests at you.
that's
And if
good.
you don't pass the curriculum, if you don't learn and grow from it, then life is going to continue to give you that same curriculum over and over again.
If
The
they keep
moment
biting
it's going to keep
you.
telling you, well, you still haven't passed this test, so I'm going to give it to you in another way. And then, you know, the point where you can learn and reflect and grow and ultimately pass that curriculum, guess what happens next? Life just gives you the next level of curriculum, and it's going to give you the next lesson and the next challenge to pass. And then that's kind of how I see it now. It's like life is just continually being exposed to a new level of curriculum, learning and trying to pass it, and then you just move on to the next one. But ultimately, what that also says is like, there is never a point where you graduate. There's never a point where you win life and you've achieved all life's lessons. It's like the more and more you go down the growth mindset rabbit hole to be like, I want to learn and grow from every experience and every trigger I have, the more and more you realize that the lessons are never, ever ending. And I don't know, for me, that's quite an exciting prospect, because for someone who loves growth, it means that I'm going to grow till the day that I die.
Yeah, that's like what you just explained is special because there's always a desire to grow. And I believe if you lose that desire to grow and to be better and to learn more about yourself and grow in areas, right? Like, because there's some people that get to the age or point where they're content with what they know and their lifestyle and who they are, and they don't want to get any better. And I believe when you lose that desire to grow, you die essentially, because it's like, then again, what are you living for? You know, and it brings all in like the values and the purpose conversation, which we don't have to dive into that. But it's like everything you explain and like how you said you're excited to keep learning and growing to the day you die. That's awesome, because what are you going to do with that? What are we doing right now? We're on a podcast. We're sharing it, right? Yeah, we want to inspire people, but we know we can connect and relate to people. Like you said, all things, you know, health, fitness, nutrition, but life perspective, mindset, you know, struggles, insecurities, and sharing the tools to grow through them and become a better man or a better woman, you know, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do for our families, right? And be the best versions of ourselves. But like what you described to me is awesome. It's like you have that desire to grow and you've never lost that hunger. And that's definitely something that I noticed about you. And I was so attracted to you and Ant when I met you. My brother and I were attracted to that, of like you guys were the same way as far as um, between my brother and I's conversations with you guys was there was always this desire to grow and learn from each other. Because I remember talking to you, it was only for a few months in the 2019 like games prep camp days, right? And it was like everything we talked about eventually when we were around each other long enough got deep. And it got to the point of like, what can I actually gain from this conversation and learn from this individual and this human and like their mindset? And it's like, I mean, it's exactly what we've done on this podcast. So I just think that's, I don't know what we can call that. But I love it. I like to call it like a hunger or the desire to grow, you know, I don't know, growth mindset, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's special and it's important.
Yeah. I think there are so many ways to label it. It's like positive mindset versus negative mindset, glass half full, glass half empty, growth mindset, fixed. It's kind of all saying the same thing, right? It's all saying the
Yeah,
same thing, but I do definitely think that the people who can adopt that growth mindset and that positive outlook on life, whilst being realistic, are generally the people that go further, you know, and whatever that means, and have more fulfillment, have more success, have more happiness, have more, you know, fill in the blank. So it's something definitely
for
that
sure.
I will believe in forever. Luke,
Love it.
I think that we're nearing time to end this great conversation, my friend. But I'd love to hear, what does the next year, what does the immediate future hold for you? We know you're going individual, so we have to see how that transpires this year. You know, you're thinking about starting a business. Tell us what to expect from you.
So I am pursuing the CrossFit season as an individual. Yes, like you had mentioned. So I would say expect seeing me compete at the CrossFit Games. I believe that wholeheartedly. and I just got married. So expect, if you follow me on Instagram, to see in the future some marriage / relationship / husband wife posts. um yeah, I mean, right now that's the path I'm on, is pursuing this full-time athlete thing and trying to inspire people and grow in that. And yeah, well, hopefully in the next year or two, there's definitely some kind of business I can talk to you about, as far as something that I started, or maybe some kind of side hustle. So I'll definitely keep you posted on that. Or
Awesome.
maybe if it's something I invent, I'll send you some product.
Please do. Well, Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure. So good connecting with you again after all these years. Obviously, been following your journey, and we've been messaging back and forth on social media, but to get you on a call and speak to you about life and history and where you are right now, it's been awesome. So thank you so much for your time.
You as well, bro. Hey, can you go give Ant a hug for me?
I will give Ant a hug for you, my friend.
I miss my bro. I miss my Hong Kong brothers, man.
Awesome, bro. Until next time.
Dessert.